We got another retro emulation handheld to take a look at from Powkiddy. Today, this is one of their latest releases, the RGB10S. I'm supposing the S is for the stick being swapped with the D-pad, as essentially this is just a revision of the old RGB10 from Powkiddy. It has very similar specs from what I'm looking at. So we have a 3.5-inch IPS screen at 480 by 320. It is a lower resolution screen here. And we got an RK3326 quad-core 1.5 gigahertz processor, 1 gigabyte of RAM, USB-C for charging. We do have Wi-Fi and a nice beefy 3000 milliamp hour battery. This thing does last quite a while. So this is a small handheld. It may be uncomfortable for some. For me, it was a little too small, but depending on your hand size and your finger size, it may be okay. Now, the buttons, D-pad, and analog stick, they're all serviceable for the most part. Not the best, but nowhere near the worst I've ever used. They get the job done. I'm able to do, moves in Street Fighter and whatnot with either the D-pad or the analog stick. But the shoulder buttons, this is where I feel I have a problem. Maybe it's not the biggest problem in the world. So the rear shoulder buttons they're more accessible than the L1 and R1. The problem with the L1 and R1 is that they're just a sliver of plastic compared to the rear two. I mean, I guess with the design of it kind of makes sense. They don't have a lot of real estate to work with here. This is something I guess you could get used to with the feeling for them and pushing them in, when needed. But the feel of them, it's a little crunchy to me. Not as smooth of a press as the rear two. If you don't like them, you can always change button configs around so the R2 and L2 registers them instead. So, in reality, it's not too much of an issue, and there's not really a lot with this handheld that you would need all the shoulder buttons for, so not a huge issue, but still worth pointing out. Now, as far as performance goes, as this is using an old chipset, expectations need to be in check. Your typical retro stuff's going to perform great. All your 8-bit, 16-bit systems, old school handhelds, they'll be fine. You're not going to have issues with NES, Super Nintendo, Neo Geo Pocket, Sega Genesis, TurboGrafx, all that kind of stuff, your Game Boy games. No real big issues. PS1 is typically going to be fine as well. I always say it, I can appreciate PS1. It's so easy to emulate on various, devices of different power, right? So PS1 is going to be mostly fine. But as usual, when it comes to your PSP, Dreamcast, and Nintendo 64, it's a very big mixed bag. Initially, you'll play some things and it'll seem okay. Some games will play fine, but maybe after that initial starting to play, some glitches and graphics problems will pop up, issues with sound, slow down. It's very difficult to get a feel for what is actually near 100% with these systems, with how everything performs all over the place with them on a device like this. Like, some PSP games will seem to play okay, but then you'll get some corruption with the graphics or slowdown will start to show. With what's included with the Dreamcast on this device, I didn't really have anything that played in an acceptable way for me. But with Naomi, it's typically the same as Dreamcast. But I did notice Marvel vs. Capcom 2 played okay, with very little issues. So really, like I said, it's just a big mixed bag here. The screen that's used here, it does look nice, and the viewing angles are pretty good. It's crazy. I remember that was one of the biggest things I used to harp on was the viewing angles with all these different handhelds, but really haven't been having an issue with that on any of these devices from most of these companies lately. So that's a good thing. I guess they stepped up their game, or they used up all the really crappy screens, with those earlier models. But with this screen being low res at 480 by 320, the look of how some consoles display may be a negative for some. I think the screen looks good. That's one of the biggest pros for me. And overall, I think the device is okay. But in reality, it's a pass. I mean, for me, there's really no innovation here. I mean, what else can they do with this chipset? Same old specs with minor revisions. But this is how a lot of these companies roll. Repurpose and re-release the same thing over and over again. And there's plenty of better options that exist at this price range. The lowest storage option for the RGB10S is a quarter the price of the lowest option for a Valve Steam Deck. Yeah, after buying and getting a Steam Deck, I kind of look at things a little differently when it comes to these kind of handhelds, but also at the same time, I do realize these devices serve a different purpose for different people. You know, maybe a small $100 device with an old RK3326 chip is fine for you. Maybe all you want to do is just play NES up the PS1 in a smaller device. You don't want some big, handheld computer type of thing. But, there are plenty of options and form factors available out there from numerous different companies if you're looking for something like this. I mean, maybe this one's fine for you, but, like I said, there's a lot of them out there, and I've covered quite a few here on my channel. Now, as I'm getting this video ready to put up, I'll be putting together a playlist of just handheld reviews that I've done over the years, so you could kind of take a look if you want. Really do appreciate you guys hanging out and watching this video with me today. It means the world. Have a good one. Bye.